Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 10 Part 56 based on novel. So let's start. Lingqing stood in the sky with an expression of deep thought on his face. The spatial ancestral symbol, which suddenly appeared out of nowhere, had clearly taken him by surprise. It is now without a doubt that Yuan Gate is in cahoots with the Yimo. In that case, how did the three great heads of Yuan Gate control the spatial ancestral symbol? Lingqing muttered. Typically speaking, the ancestral symbols have extremely powerful restraining properties against the Yimo. Therefore, as long as there was demonic aura within one's body, the ancestral symbols would resist with their full strength. As such, much less needed to be said about controlling them. However, Lingqing clearly felt that previous fluctuation and knew that it was indeed the strength of the ancestral symbol. Moreover, the fact that the large silver hand could easily penetrate through space was also something that could only be accomplished by the spatial ancestral symbol. In fact, even a peak-level reincarnation stage expert would have difficulties penetrating through space without leaving any traces behind. Ying Huan was also frowning while she gently shook her head. Evidently, she was also uncertain about how Yuan Gate managed to control the spatial ancestral symbol. Forget it. I don't care what techniques they used. However, a divine item like an ancestral symbol must not land in their hands. With a faint smile, a cold glint flashed across Lingqing's dark black eyes as he said, "We will snatch the spatial ancestral symbol after finishing off those three old dogs." Ying Huan nodded. Her icy blue eyes suddenly glanced into the distance before she lifted her icy blue hair over her earlobe. Meanwhile, there was an unknown expression on her chilly face. At the spot where she glanced at, there was also another great beauty, who seemed to have been forged from the life essence of the world. Lingqing also detected her line of sight. Soon after, his face, which remained impassive even when up against the great heads of Yuan Gate, suddenly became uneasy. After all, there was indeed an awkward relationship between the three of them. Lingqing and Lingqing had spent an intimate night together before. Moreover, a major factor why he chose to leave the small Great Yang Empire many years ago was because he wanted to chase after this person who had once bloomed like an epiphyllum flower in his life. Lingqing was prideful, while Lingqing was stubborn. Back then, because he looked up to her, he wanted to surpass her. Therefore, Lingqing had no choice but to admit that there was a strong desire to conquer Lingqing deep within his heart. Meanwhile, the seed of this desire was planted back at that lonely mountain top. Underlying his desire to conquer her was overbearing pride that belonged to a man. Therefore, he did not know whether he could remain calm if Lingqing was lying in the arms of another man. The ridiculous deed that they did back then left an extremely deep impression on both of their hearts, and it could never be erased. This was something that neither of them could deny. Ying Huan was someone Lingqing subsequently met. With regards to her various contributions and how long she spent waiting for him, even if Lingqing was a cold-hearted individual, he could never forget about it. In fact, even up till today, whenever he thought about the scenes back at the unique Devil City, his heart still aches gently. That lovely and lively girl had transformed into this icy beauty partly because of him. Meanwhile, the heartache and pain that she suffered as her personality changed was perhaps something that even Ying Huan was not clearly aware of. Furthermore, there was no doubt that both ladies were outstanding. One was the most outstanding disciple Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace ever had, while the other was actually the reincarnator of the Ice Master. As such, the both of them were extremely prideful. Of course, when these two dazzling ladies clashed, it was clearly impossible for either one of them to back down. This was also why Lingqing felt a headache. Charge! While Lingqing was fretting over this matter, earth-shaking battle cries sounded from below. Immediately, the disciples from Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace charged towards the disciples from Yuan Gate. After losing most of their elders, those Yuan Gate disciples were clearly dispirited. Hence, miserable cries rung continuously across the sky as they were being hunted by the disciples from Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. There was no concept of cruelty at this moment. Yuan Gate was the one who started the war, and they naturally had to pay a price for doing so. Moreover, these Yuan Gate disciples were all corrupted by the demonic aura. Therefore, at this rate, it was likely that they would slowly lose their minds and turn into human beasts, who only know how to kill. The battle cries continued for a long time. After which, corpses belonging to the disciples from Yuan Gate covered the entire mountain range. Those who managed to survive through sheer luck, fled miserably in all directions, and they were no longer as fearsome as before. Big Brother Lingqing. At afar, Su Ruo waved her small hand in Lingqing's direction. Meanwhile, her small face appeared flushed from excitement. Lingqing opened his stride and walked towards her upon seeing this. Behind him, Ying Huan hesitated for a moment before she bit her red lips and followed him at a leisurely pace. Big Brother Lingqing, you aren't injured, you. Su Ruo looked at Lingqing, who had landed in front of him. Then, she carefully surveyed him before uttering those words with a smile. Currently, there were countless disciples from Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace gathered around them. These people were all staring curiously at Lingqing with gratitude in their eyes. After all, if Lingqing and his men did not show up and assist them today, their Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace would have become an entry in the history book of the Eastern Xian region. Lingqing smiled as he shook his head. After which, he looked towards the cool fairy like Lingqing, who was dressed in white and standing behind Su Ruo. When Lingqing detected this, she tilted her head only to look at Ying Huan, who was standing behind Lingqing. The air seemingly solidified the instant those two ladies looked at each other. Both of their demeanors were somewhat icy cold. However, due to Ying Huan's constitution, the cold air around her was unusually chilly. On the other hand, Lingqing's chill originated from her demeanor. These two ladies were the center of attention no matter where they were. However, when they were placed together, their respective radiance and coldness seemed to be in contrast with each other. This area seemed to have fallen within the unique charms of those two ladies. This caused the surrounding disciples from Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace to shut their mouths, while their eyes continuously oscillated between the two of them. After which, they glanced at Lingqing, who was standing between them. Some sensitive individuals even lifted their brows, before they cast an envious and pitiful look towards Lingqing. Little Martin, First Elder Zhu Li and the rest also hurried over. When they saw this strange atmosphere, they smirked involuntarily. Meanwhile, they looked at Lingqing with a playful expression in their eyes. The strange atmosphere continued. However, both Ying Huan and Lingqing did not speak up. Finally, Lingqing could only cough softly in order to break the silence. After which, he glanced at the damaged Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace before he pondered and asked, "Where is the palace master?" "Teacher has died." A dim expression flashed across Lingqing's autumn water-like eyes, before she continued, "The elders are all seriously injured. Our Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace has suffered serious losses." Lingqing sighed softly. This was something that was unavoidable. After all, the current Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace was indeed unable to put up much of a resistance against Yuan Gate. In fact, had they arrived a little later, it was likely that Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace would have suffered even more severe losses. This time around, on behalf of every disciple from Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace, I would like to thank you, your friends from Dao Sect, and elders from another region. Lingqing softly said. "Ha ha, no problem at all." First Elder Zhu Li laughed. Then, he quickly shook his head and said, "Forget it. You young fellows should have a chat. An old man like me is unable to handle this tense atmosphere." He turned around and left after uttering those words. Little Martin and the rest also grinned before they left. Following which, the surrounding disciples from Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace also left in small groups. However, they continued to cast some curious glances over. Ying Huan's icy blue pretty eyes glanced at Lingqing when she saw the scattering crowd. After which, she smiled at Lingqing and extended her delicate hand, "Ying Huan from Dao Sect. I believe that we have met before." Lingqing. As of now, there is likely no one in the entire Eastern Xian region who doesn't know who Miss Huan is. There was also a rarely seen smile on Lingqing's pretty face. Then, she extended her hand before she gently shook Ying Huan's hand. It seems like these two prideful individuals were unwilling to submit in front of the other. The both of you should have a chat. Ying Huan did not say anything more. Instead, she turned and stared at Lin Dong. After which, with a much gentler tone, she said, "Let's return to Dao sect after you are done. I will be waiting for you." She did not linger on after uttering those words. Instead, she turned around and left. "Miss Huan treats you very well." Lingqing was quiet for a moment after she saw that Ying Huan had left. Finally, she remarked, "You went to the Great Yang Empire? My mother said that she has met you before." Lin Dong smiled. He stared at Lingqing before he asked. Lingqing nodded in a seemingly calm manner. However, her fair face was slightly flushed as she said, "It just so happens that I went to the Great Yang Empire to do something. After which, I decided to visit your parents as well." She continued to speak in a calm manner. However, there were tiny ripples in her eyes which typically held no emotions. That was because she knew that her excuse was simply too far-fetched. Lin Dong nodded and said, "My mother asked me when I was going to bring the both of you back." Lingqing rolled her eyes. Her demeanor caused one's bones to soften. After which, she raised her brow, before she questioned him, "Both of us?" Instantly, Lin Dong felt his head swell. Lingqing curled her red lips. After which, she turned her head away and said, "After 3 years, you have changed quite a bit." Lin Dong smiled. Then, he lifted his head and looked at the setting sun. "That is because I want to come back." Lingqing remained silent. His short sentence allowed her to understand just how much hard work this young man in front of her had put in over the last 3 years. Others had only witnessed his glory. However, no one knew how many times he lingered between life and death in order to obtain this strength. "Actually, you were very powerful 3 years ago," Lingqing said softly. The scene from 3 years ago flashed within her mind. A blood-covered skinny man holding onto a long spear did not display the slightest fear even when up against the 3 great heads of Yuan Gate. His courage and charisma caused the expressions of countless people to change, even including hers. Lin Dong smiled. After which, he slowly stretched his lazy waist and exhaled, "Since I am back, it's time to wrap things up. What are your plans?" When Lingqing felt the bloodthirstiness within his words, she suddenly asked. Lin Dong lifted his head. He stared at that bloody sunset before his faint voice slowly spread. 3 days later, we will fight to the death with Yuan Gate. Yuan Gate's attempt to destroy 9 Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace failed because of the arrival of Lin Dong's men. Nonetheless, despite their failed attempt, 9 Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace was turned into ruins. Moreover, their palace master died from serious injuries, while all their elders were severely wounded. Hence, 9 Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace was currently at its weakest moment. You should bring the disciples from your 9 Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace and follow me back to Dao sect. You guys can't stay in this place anymore. After all, if Yuan Gate launches another sneak attack, the disciples of your 9 Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace will definitely suffer terribly. When he realized that the current 9 Heaven's Supreme Purity Place lacked the ability to protect itself, Lin Dong decided to ask for Lingqing's opinion. This? Lingqing hesitated for a moment after hearing this. If they were to simply head to Dao sect now, it would feel as though they were imposing on them. Therefore, even though she knew that what Lin Dong proposed was the ideal solution, she inevitably felt a little resistant in her heart. You are now the palace master of 9 Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace. Lin Dong glanced at her before he slowly said. Lingqing clenched her hand tightly, before she promptly nodded her head. Currently, she had to think on behalf of the disciples of 9 Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace. Therefore, she had to be willing to swallow her pride. Go and instruct them. Lin Dong watched the ruins in front of him and sighed softly. Within a few days, a super sect, which once towered over the eastern Xian region, was nearly exterminated. As such, it was likely that Lingqing was also feeling extremely terrible in her heart. Lin Dong turned around and left after uttering those words. After which, he sat on a mountain top and observed the scene after the news spread. This caused the disciples of Nine Heaven Supreme Purity Palace to feel a little upset. Are you asking her to follow us back to Dao sect? A cold aura approached Lin Dong from the side. After which, Ying Huan sat elegantly beside him. Her hands supported her cheeks while her pretty eyes looked at the Nine Heaven Supreme Purity Palace disciples, who were currently cleaning up the mess. Lin Dong nodded and smilingly asked, do you mind? I am not so petty. Ying Huan rolled her eyes. After which, she stared at the ruins in front of her and muttered, actually, I can empathize with her. This is because I was also carrying the burden of the entire Dao sect before your return. After all, Yuan Gate has countless powerful individuals and the three great heads had yet to make a move. Hence, I was also worried that should I fail, the many disciples from Dao sect would also wound up just like them. During the past 3 years, I was missing you badly. However, I also had to do my best to protect Dao sect. Ying Huan folded her long legs. Her pretty snow-white face was lowered to her knees. Meanwhile, a heartbreaking frailness rose onto her pretty face, which was now covered by cold frost. I was afraid that I would not be able to hang on until your return. Or perhaps, by the time you returned, Dao sect would have been destroyed and I would have been forced to become another person. Lin Dong stared in shock at the girl seated beside him. Evidently, she had a hard time over the last 3 years. However, did any of them here have an easy time? 3 years ago, she was a lively and cute girl, the little princess that all disciples from Dao sect cherished. She could have fun every day without any worries. However, soon after, the lives of every Dao sect disciple fell onto her delicate shoulders. Just by thinking about the heavy burden that she had to carry, one's heart began to ache. It has been tough on you. However, now that I am back, let me carry that burden. I am extremely thick-skinned and I specialize in dealing with these things. With a warm expression in his eyes, Lin Dong extended his hand and gently rubbed Ying Huan's head. Her smooth hair was a little icy and it felt extremely comfortable. However, his actions caused a faint flush to appear on Ying Huan's pretty face. This lass, who now had a reputation in Dao sect that was not inferior to Lin Dong, gently acknowledged in an extremely obedient manner. After which, she used a voice that only he could hear before she said, don't worry. Whatever you do, I will support you. In the distance, Lingqing, who was instructing the disciples from Nine Heaven Supreme Purity Palace to clean up the mess and prepare to leave, suddenly saw the two people on the mountain top. Immediately, she gently bit her red lips, while some chaotic ripples were actually stirred in her typically unemotional heart. Senior Sister Qingshu, it seems like you have met a formidable opponent this time around. A low voice suddenly sounded from her side. It turns out Su Ruo had unknowingly approached her. Meanwhile, the latter's eyes were also focused on the mountain top as she grinned and said. Lingqing glanced indifferently at her and said, Ying Huan stepped forward back at the unique Devil City and risked her life to force Ying Xuanzi to appear and rescue him. Her courage to love is something that I cannot hope to match up to. That's not true. Regardless, the both of you have contrasting personalities, and the way in which the both of you express your love is different. I know that you fancy big brother Lin Dong. Otherwise, given your character, why would you make an annual trip to the Great Yang Empire? Su Ruo said. Senior Sister Qingshu, your heart might be wrapped by a layer of ice, but there are raging flames within. However, I'm afraid that big brother Lin Dong is the only man who will be able to enjoy your heated emotions. Even with Lingqing's lotus-like calmness, her pretty face reddened when she heard Su Ruo's teasing. Then, she said in a somewhat indignant manner, you lass, who taught you these irritating things? Go and do what is needed and withdraw. All right. Su Ruo replied with a smile. Then, she waved her small hand and said, however, don't miss out on this opportunity, Senior Sister Qingshu. After all, there is no medicine for regret in this world. Lingqing looked at Su Ruo, who fled while laughing. Then, she pursed her red lips. Her heart, which had just gradually calmed down, once again began to race. Meanwhile, the ripples stirred grew increasingly intense. They finally cleaned up the place after half a day. After which, Lingqing and the rest did not linger on. When they glanced at this place, which was still a majestic sight a couple of days ago, all of them sighed softly. Finally, with a wave of his hand, Lingqing led the group before they turned around and left. When they saw a large group returning to Dao sect, it naturally stirred quite a commotion. Those disciples from Dao sect looked at the gloomy and dispirited disciples from Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace, before they sighed quietly. This war had affected the entire Eastern Xian region. If it was not because their Dao sect had Ying Huan and Lingqing's timely return, it was likely that their fate would be even more miserable than those Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciples. Within the main hall of Dao sect, Ying Xuanzi released a deep sigh after he heard about what happened to Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. His expression was a gloomy and dispirited one. Other than Yuan Gate, only our Dao sect still stands in the Eastern Xian region. I believe that there is no way that they will let us off. Ying Xuanzi said. Sect Master, there is no need to be overly worried. Although Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace suffered a great loss this time around, Yuan Gate also paid a hefty price. In fact, many of their elders were killed. Furthermore, even with the Yimo secretly helping them, it is impossible for them to simply brush off such a significant loss. Lingqing shook his head and continued, currently, Yuan Gate might have lost the ability to launch an attack. Moreover, those three great heads of Yuan Gate are extremely cunning. Therefore, it is likely that they will not make a move at this moment. So, do you mean? A glint flashed across Ying Xuanzi's eyes. Take the initiative to attack and obliterate Yuan Gate. Let's end the chaos in the Eastern Xian region once and for all. A fearsome glint flashed across Lingqing's eyes. However, he spoke in an extremely calm voice. Ying Xuanzi and the various elders of Dao sect were all startled upon hearing this. Currently, Yuan Gate was extremely powerful and most people would rather hide from them and protect themselves. However, Lingqing was even more ruthless than them, as he actually wanted to take the initiative to attack Yuan Gate. Father, although Yuan Gate is powerful, our Dao sect is no pushover. There is no telling who will emerge victorious in an actual fight. Ying Huan also spoke at this moment. Moreover, the Yimo are extremely cunning. Hence, there is no telling what could happen if we allow Yuan Gate to drag this on. Lingqing nodded. It was likely that Devil Prison were the ones supporting Yuan Gate. Moreover, it was clear that they were plotting to pull off a massive scheme. Therefore, they did not dare to show themselves and decided to use Yuan Gate as a proxy. Hence, if they did not destroy Yuan Gate as soon as possible, it might be difficult for them to nip the problem in the bud. Elder Ying Xuanzi. Yuan Gate might no longer be the strongest faction in the Eastern Xian region after this defeat. Lingqing, who was quietly listening, suddenly remarked in a soft voice. Oh. Ying Xuanzi was startled. Then, he turned to look at Lingqing. The war that Yuan Gate started affected the entire Eastern Xian region, and many super sects were destroyed. However, although those super sects were destroyed, not everyone within was killed. In fact, many powerful individuals managed to escape. Therefore, if Dao sect takes the initiative and pledge to exterminate Yuan Gate, I believe that countless powerful hidden individuals would swarm over. At that time, the situation would be reversed and Yuan Gate will end up falling into a disadvantage. Lingqing's cool voice resounded through the hall, causing the eyes of many to brighten abruptly. Lingqing also glanced at Lingqing in surprise. What she proposed was indeed quite ruthless and it directly addressed the heart of the problem. By taking advantage of the hatred that Yuan Gate had created, they would be able to gather all the hidden experts and band them together to fight against Yuan Gate. After which, Yuan Gate would be forced to fight a life and death battle with the entire Eastern Xian region. Lingqing, what do you think? A glint flashed across Ying Xuanzi's eyes. Meanwhile, there was an unconcealable excited glow on his face. Lingqing smiled and nodded. All right. Ying Xuanzi suddenly stood up. Currently, he looked somewhat agitated. After all, over the last year, his Dao sect was pushed by Yuan Gate until they could barely catch their breath. However, was the situation finally about to reverse? spread the news and invite all the powerful practitioners within the Eastern Xian region to form a Yuan Destruction Alliance. 3 days later, we will band together and fight to the death with Yuan Gate. News regarding the Yuan Destruction Alliance quickly spread across the entire Eastern Xian region. Although there was little activity initially, the entire region quickly boiled after the news was confirmed. Following which, countless experts hidden in different parts of the Eastern Xian region rose and hurried towards Dao sect. Meanwhile, these powerful practitioners all had the same expression, that was hatred towards Yuan Gate. The sky of the Eastern Xian region became incomparably lively within a short 2 to 3 days. Countless figures streaked across the sky and headed straight for Dao sect. A vengeful aura stealthily enveloped the entire Eastern Xian region. Yuan Gate. Currently, this sect no longer had the grand and majestic aura that it had before. Instead, black demonic aura enveloped the interior of the sect, while dark chilly winds blew continuously. Those Yuan Gate disciples shuttling within the sect absorbed the demonic aura, and they had intoxicated and fearsome expressions. This sect looked just like a demonic region. In the deepest part of Yuan Gate, 3 figures were standing above a deep mountain stream with their hands behind their back. Meanwhile, an extremely frightening aura slowly spread from within their bodies. I heard that Dao sect is organizing a Yuan Destruction Alliance to fight with us to the death. One of the 3 figures suddenly laughed softly before he said, "In that case, let's wait for them to come. Once we destroy that alliance, no one in the Eastern Xian region will be able to oppose us. At that time, our Yuan Gate shall become the only overlord." Standing in the middle, a white-robed man said. His eyes were black and white in color, and it looked as though yin and yang were suspended in them, giving him an incomparably mysterious look. This person was precisely Qian Yuanzi. I exchanged blows with Lin Dong before. I never expected him to become so powerful after 3 years. How interesting. Beside him, a silver-haired Ren Yuanzi smiled indifferently and said, "We were able to kill him easily 3 years ago. It will be the same 3 years later. The final result will not change." Qian Yuanzi said in a faint voice. Ren Yuanzi smiled and nodded. Then, he waved his sleeve before a silver light shot out from his hand and headed into the deep mountain stream below. I am still unable to fully utilize this ancestral symbol. After all, it doesn't belong to me. How unfortunate. That silver light shot into the deep stream. Meanwhile, black fog was drifting at the deepest part of the stream, and there seemed to be a blurry figure seated like a statue at that spot. That silver light flashed before it shot into that figure's body. Qian Yuanzi looked at the blurry figure at the deepest part of the mountain stream. With a strange expression, he muttered, "Yuan Destruction Alliance. Ha ha, come, come. Dao sect, I will give all of you a present that you guys would have never imagined." Within merely 3 days, the atmosphere within the Eastern Xian region unknowingly began to change in various mysterious ways. Those experts, who had been hiding from the experts of Yuan Gate, began to leave their hiding places. After which, they headed towards Dao sect, the only other super sect left on the Eastern Xian region besides Yuan Gate. The commotion and effectiveness of the Yuan Destruction Alliance had far exceeded the expectations of Ying Xuanzi's group. Hence, they were a little stunned when they saw the number of experts flooding towards their Dao sect. Ultimately, it seems like they had underestimated the hatred created by Yuan Gate in the Eastern Xian region. The mountains outside Dao sect were packed with humans. A noisy din gathered together and shot towards the clouds, causing this spacious mountain range to become as noisy as a bustling marketplace. Furthermore, there were still light figures occasionally streaking across the sky. Meanwhile, many of them had powerful auras. Clearly, all of them had one thing in common, as their eyes were all filled with intense hatred. Their sects were destroyed, their martial brothers were killed, and they were forced to live like fugitives. Every single one of these occurrences was sufficient for them to become sworn enemies of Yuan Gate. As more and more powerful practitioners headed over, the Dao sect sect-guarding formation began to tremble. Finally, the light barrier slowly scattered. Following which, vast and powerful Yuan power fluctuations spread like floodwaters. Countless figures rushed out in all directions. Finally, They hovered in the sky. Their agglomerated aura was vast and mighty. Meanwhile, every Dao sect disciple was wearing a confident expression even though they knew how powerful their opponents were going to be. When those experts, who had originated from the other vanquished super sects, saw these Dao sect disciples, all of them sighed secretly. Compared to Dao sect, the disciples from their super sects were indeed a little lacking. It's no wonder Dao sect was the only super sect in Eastern Xian region who was able to survive repeated invasions from Yuan Gate. Bang! A monstrous ferocious aura suddenly soared towards the sky while everyone was sighing emotionally. The intensity of that aura caused countless powerful experts to be stunned. They quickly lifted their heads and saw a black cloud rushing out from within Dao sect. Subsequently, a group of men stood in the sky and did not move at all. In fact, they were breathing as though they were a single entity. Meanwhile, their intense and brutal aura seemingly transformed into a 10,000 feet large tiger above them, and it looked exceptionally fearsome. Those powerful experts all had a drastic change in their expressions when they saw this formidable army. Promptly, fear flashed across their eyes. Clearly, they realized just how powerful this army was. Is this army from Dao sect? Why haven't I heard about it before? It is rumored that this army was brought back to Dao sect by Lingqing and they are extremely powerful. Lingqing? Could it be that Dao sect disciple who was forced to leave the Eastern Xian region 3 years ago? Who else could it be? However, unlike back then, he is no longer an unknown little kid. 3 days ago, the first elder of Yuan Gate led an army to attack Nine Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace, and Lingqing hurried over to reinforce the latter. In the end, none of those old bastards from Yuan Gate managed to escape. He's so powerful? Dao sect is truly blessed. Back then, they had Zhu Tong. Now, they got Lingqing. Truly. The reason why Dao sect dares to attack Yuan Gate is largely because Lingqing has returned. Moreover, he even brought back a group of extremely frightening helpers. This time around, those 3 bastards from Yuan Gate have finally met their match. Many private conversations suddenly erupted after that ferocious group showed up. Following which, many people's eyes were filled with surprise and curiosity. Clearly, within a few days' time, Lingqing's name, which was once famed across the entire Eastern Xian region, was unearthed again. After the tiger-devouring army appeared, many rays of light subsequently shot out from behind. After which, they stood in the sky. They were Ying Xuanzi, Lingqing, First Elder Zhu Li and the rest. The din in this place died down immediately after Ying Xuanzi showed up. Everyone, I believe that we are not strangers. My Dao sect would like to express our sympathy towards the painful experiences that all of you have been through over the past year. However, in the past, our Dao sect could barely protect ourselves and we were unable to lend a helping hand. Therefore, I hope that everyone will not bear a grudge because of this. Ying Xuanzi surveyed the mountain range before he cupped his hands together. Then, his low cry resounded across this mountain range. Sect Master Ying Xuanzi is too polite. All of us were far too short-sighted. Against such a calamity, if we had joined forces in time, we would not have landed in this state. At a short distance away, a large group of men were standing in the sky. Leading that group was a withered and skinny green-cloaked old man, with a large green sword on his back. Meanwhile, extremely sharp sword auras were being emitted by him. At this moment, there was a bitter expression on that elder's face. Sigh, Sect Master Mo. Ying Xuanzi looked at that green-clothed old man and sighed. Who is he? Lingqing glanced at that green-clothed old man. The latter was extremely powerful and it was obvious that he was an ultimate expert who had stepped into the samsara stage. Moreover, the sword aura circling him was quite formidable. Clearly, he was no ordinary individual. He is the sect master of Blade Sect, Mo Jian. However, as of now, Blade Sect has already disappeared and I'm afraid that they are all that is left. Standing beside him, Ying Huan softly replied. There are also sect master and elders from other vanquished super sects. They managed to escape from Yuan Gate, but they did not dare to show themselves until now. Standing on the left of Lindong, Lingqing surveyed this sea of people before she spoke in a somewhat ethereal and pleasing voice. It's all thanks to you. If we can band them together, we will have a much higher chance of defeating Yuan Gate. Lindong gave a heartfelt praise. If their Dao sect was to fight to the death with Yuan Gate alone, it was likely that they would end up with a Pyrrhic victory even if they could succeed. This is also because you led us to a huge victory 3 days ago. Otherwise, these people would not dare to show themselves. In fact, they would rather leave the Eastern Xian region than to oppose Yuan Gate. Lingqing shook her head and said, "If we do not properly organize this group of people, I'm afraid that this Yuan Destruction Alliance might only end up becoming a burden." Ying Huan said in a faint voice. Miss Huan is right. These people are indeed powerful. However, if their strength cannot be controlled, it would only end up becoming a burden. Lingqing glanced at Ying Huan and nodded. Lindong nodded as well. After which, he exchanged glances with Ying Xuanzi before he slowly stepped forward. Every pair of eyes swiftly turned towards him the moment he did so. In fact, a small uproar vaguely erupted. It was likely that all of them recognized him. Friends from the Eastern Xian region, I believe that all of you know why we have invited you guys here. The war started by Yuan Gate has impacted the entire Eastern Xian region. Many super sects were destroyed and their members were killed. It's likely that everyone here shares the same attitude that Dao sect holds towards Yuan Gate. Lindong looked around him, before a stern expression flashed across his eyes. That aura caused even the sect master of Blade Sect, Mo Jian, to feel secretly startled. Then, Lindong's deep voice reverberated across the sky. However, everyone should also know how powerful Yuan Gate is. Hence, there is only one way to get rid of this cancer. That is to band together and combine our forces. Our Dao sect has sworn that we will never coexist with Yuan Gate. Today, our Dao sect will leave our base and fight to the death with Yuan Gate. If anyone shares the same desire, our Dao sect will naturally regard you as an ally. However, if anyone secretly creates obstructions and affect my Dao sect's desire to destroy Yuan Gate, I, Lindong, will regard that person as a member of Yuan Gate. Rumble. A fearsome glint suddenly flashed across Lindong's eyes after his voice sounded. Following which, monstrous purple-gold light swept forward, before thousands of purple-gold dragon symbols appeared. Then, they directly transformed into a massive tens of thousands feet large purple-gold dragon claw. After which, that claw swung forward, before the land collapsed immediately, leaving a deep gully that stretched on for 100,000 feet. Moreover, it even directly split a mountain into two, and it was an extremely terrifying sight. A loud sound rumbled continuously across the sky, while dust spread on the ground. Countless experts below were staring at Lindong, who now looked like a battle deity filled with a frightening and ferocious aura. Immediately, shock surged into their eyes, while cold sweat dripped down from their foreheads. Compared to Ying Xuanzi, this young man acted in a much more fearsome and formidable manner. Roar! A monstrous tiger roar followed, as the tiger-devouring army roared towards the sky. Immediately, dense ferocity covered the sky and blotted out the sun, causing Lindong to look even more menacing. The entire sky gradually became silent. Even those formidable former sect master and elders from various super sects were intimidated by Lindong. As such, none of them dared to speak up. When Lingqing looked at Lindong, who managed to intimidate countless experts from the Eastern Xian region with a single sentence, a faint arc slowly lifted on the corner of her lips. Who could have imagined that this man, who was a tender and weak youth many years ago, would grow by such an extent? In fact, it was not an exaggeration to claim that the current Lindong was the #1 individual in the entire Eastern Xian region. Young brother Lindong is right. Yuan Gate destroyed our sect and we are arch-enemies with them. Our goals are all aligned. Hence, there is no way we will pose any obstructions. If anyone here dares to do so, I think that none of us will let him off. Sect Master Mo from Blade Sect gradually recovered his senses. Meanwhile, the fear in his eyes retreated as he cupped his hands together and laughed. Sect Master Mo is right. As long as we can destroy Yuan Gate, our great desolate palace will follow young brother Lindong's every command. At a short distance away, an extremely skinny old man also cried out in a deep voice. This person was the sect master of Great Desolate Palace, and he was also a well-known expert in the Eastern Xian region. After the two of them spoke up, many cries of agreement followed. Instantly, the emotions of countless individuals surged, before their hatred towards Yuan Gate converged together. Ying Xuanzi watched this sea of people in front of him, who were now completely stirred up, before he quietly sighed in relief. After which, he turned to look at Lindong, before a tinge of satisfaction flashed across his eyes. "Thank you, sect masters." Lindong cupped his hands together towards the two sect masters. After which, he slowly withdrew his monstrous brutal aura before he said, "Since everyone shares the same goal, the Yuan Destruction Alliance will thus be formed. Everyone can decide to leave or stay after this matter is resolved." "And now?" Lindong's voice paused, before his eyes looked afar. Then, his eyes swept across the sea of people scattered across the mountain range. All of their eyes were filled with hatred towards Yuan Gate. Lindong slowly lifted his hand. In the next instant, rich murderous intent surged into his eyes. "Let's go. Today, we shall destroy Yuan Gate." Roar! Earth-shaking roars resounded across the sky and the mountains began to tremble. After which, Yuan power surged before countless people rushed forward. After which, a monstrous torrent swept across the sky. The decisive battle with Yuan Gate had finally arrived. This video will end here.